residential properties in the UK, the cheapest and easiest way to get rid of Japanese knotweed is to treat the plant with strong weed killer, also known as herbicide. But as I'm sure you've realised, buying a load of weed killer and dumping it on the invasive pest in your garden isn't the best way to remove Japanese knotweed, and in fact doesn't work. So how do you do it? In this TCM video, you'll learn 1, how herbicide works, 2, how to apply herbicide to your Japanese knotweed to control it, 3, how to do so legally, number 4, how to dispose of your Japanese knotweed and hazardous chemicals. Let's crack on. So herbicides. Firstly, it's important that you understand that... Wait, hang on. Because before we continue, and continue we will, I promise, it's important that I tell you one thing about controlling or killing Japanese knotweed in your garden, and it's this. Yes, you can treat Japanese knotweed yourself, but we strongly recommend you don't do it for 3 main reasons. Number 1, if you treat Japanese knotweed yourself, you may inadvertently spread it further across your garden, causing a wider and even stronger infestation that's much harder to manage in the future. The second reason we advise you not to treat Japanese knotweed yourself is because it's so easy to dispose of it incorrectly, and also dispose of the chemicals that you're using to treat it incorrectly, and it can get you in trouble with the law. Number 3, if you treat Japanese knotweed yourself on your property, you won't be issued an insurance-backed guarantee, which is an essential document if you ever wish to move in the future. But back to how to kill Japanese knotweed, which is the bit you're here for. So how does herbicide work? To get rid of Japanese knotweed effectively, it's important that you understand what herbicide is and exactly how it works. Essentially, herbicide is a strong weed killer, which is essentially a cocktail of lots of different substances, namely glyphosate, which is a super strong weed killer. On a side note, many shop-bought weed killers are glyphosate-free or contain a very low dose of it, which is why shop-bought weed killers aren't the best to treat Japanese knotweed. Even if it looks like they're working, they're not strong enough to get down to the roots and properly kill the plant. Now, as you may know, it's the Japanese knotweed rhizome, aka its root, that makes the plant so difficult to get rid of. This is because the root lies a good metre below ground and can extend several metres laterally. It's within this root that Japanese knotweed stores its energy. And so if you want to control Japanese knotweed, you'll need to attack this rhizome with herbicides. So I hear you ask, if the root is below ground, how best to treat it with weed killer? So the best way to treat Japanese knotweed with weed killer is to spray the leaves and the stem with herbicides, usually using a knapsack and a spray gun. When you spray Japanese knotweed with herbicides, the leaves drink down the poison into its root. In theory, with the correct glyphosate ratio, execution and timing, spraying knotweed with herbicides is the best way to kill it. Oh, and another thing, don't think you can unearth the Japanese knotweed root and dump a heck a load of weed killer on it. This simply won't work. For reference, it will be like throwing soup at your belly button, hoping your tummy will take it in. You really need to attack the plant with herbicides on its leaves and stems so it can drink the poison down and kill it from the inside out. Also, we really don't suggest you dig up Japanese knotweed, as this is a surefire way to let it spread throughout your garden. Okay, so how do you get rid of Japanese knotweed? It bears repeating that we really don't suggest you treat Japanese knotweed yourself, but as you'll be looking on the internet for this information anyway, here it goes. The best time to treat Japanese knotweed is at the end of summer when the knotweed has flowered. Having said that, spraying Japanese knotweed isn't a one-time, one-fix solution, and you'll want to be spraying it twice more over the summer before your final spray at the end of summer for best results. So, assuming you've managed to buy the right weed killer with the right glyphosate ratio and a knapsack, here is how to treat Japanese knotweed. Number 1, clear the area. That's right, you need to create a Japanese knotweed zone where no pets, family, or even the neighbourhood pigeon comes along and disturbs the area. This is because it's crucial that the area is kept separate from your family, because you'll be using really harsh chemicals, and because you don't want the plant to spread further when they catch it on their clothes or fur. Number 2, equip yourself with the right PPE. That's right, personal protection equipment is essential if you're planning to treat Japanese knotweed yourself. So think masks and gloves and chemical suits. This is because you'll be spraying your knotweed with glyphosate, which is a strong solution and not particularly good if you inhale too much of the substance or get it on your skin. It's also important to have PPE in place because although not foolproof, it does help prevent Japanese knotweed from spreading further throughout your garden. Number 3, fill up your knapsack with herbicide and get to spraying those leaves and stems. Number 4, once you've sprayed your Japanese knotweed, please put the herbicide well away from curious children and pets. Remember, this is a highly toxic substance. Number 5, repeat the steps 2 to 3 times over the summer, paying particular attention to the end of summer once the plant has flowered. It's also important to note that you'll want to spray Japanese knotweed for 2 to 3 years for 2 to 3 times over a summer, depending on the age and aggressiveness of the infestation. So there you have it. That's how to treat Japanese knotweed with herbicides, aka weed killer. But now the important question, how do you do so legally? Do you need a license to treat Japanese knotweed? If you're treating Japanese knotweed yourself in your garden with high-grade weed killer, you may need to hold a certificate of competence or have carried out a control of substance hazard to health assessment. At least that's what the UK government have said on the matter, and I'll include the link below. Once again, if the Japanese knotweed you're treating is near a watercourse, so a river or a stream for example, or near protected land, you'll definitely want to contact Natural England and the Environmental Agency before you start spraying. I mean, who wants to kill this guy? That could be someone's dad. The government are also keen to point out that you aren't legally required to remove or treat the Japanese knotweed in your garden. The only complication arises is when you let it spread into the wild, in which case they may take legal action against you. Other pieces of legislation to get to grips with include the Environmental Protection Act of 1990, the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1984, and the Control of Pesticides Regulations of 1986. To learn more about how to treat Japanese knotweed legally and not get in trouble with the law, please see below where I've included a link to the government website. So you've treated your Japanese knotweed, you're doing it legally, so how do you get rid of it? Can you put Japanese knotweed in the bin? No, you can't put Japanese knotweed in the bin, and it doesn't matter if you've treated it with herbicides or not. In fact, putting Japanese knotweed in your bin is a criminal offence in the UK. You have to remember that Japanese knotweed is a highly invasive plant, and disposing of it incorrectly can encourage it to spread beyond your garden and into the wild, causing harm to our natural world. Again, it's a criminal offence to get rid of Japanese knotweed in your household waste bin, recycling bin, green bin, over the fence or in any fly tipping area. It's also illegal to take Japanese knotweed to the dump, but let me explain that one in a minute. So how do you legally dispose of Japanese knotweed, especially if it's been treated with high-grade weed killer? To legally dispose of Japanese knotweed in the UK, you'll need to take it via a registered waste carrier to a registered licensed landfill site. You must also take any soils containing fragments of Japanese knotweed, but crucially, not any soils that don't contain Japanese knotweed. Finally, to legally dispose of herbicides, you must also take it in a registered waste vehicle to a licensed landfill centre, and that includes Japanese knotweed treated with the herbicide. To do so, you may also need an environmental permit and a waste exemption, but you can find more details about that below. If you're thinking getting rid of Japanese knotweed is difficult, that's because it is. Yes, spraying Japanese knotweed with herbicides is the best way to control it in a residential garden, but you must also consider everything else. For example, avoiding flouting the law or accidentally spreading it further, even into neighbouring property, and causing yourself a whole load of legal issues, let alone saying anything about moving home in the future and not having an insurance-backed guarantee. With all that considered, it really is quite easy to see how so many homeowners ignore the Japanese knotweed in their garden. It's comforting to know that most homeowners do hire Japanese knotweed professionals to remove the knotweed in their garden. If you do so, it means that you don't have to lift a finger, not worry about legal issues or accidentally spreading the plant beyond your boundary, and also you'll be issued the much needed insurance-backed guarantee, which is essential if you ever want to move home in the future. So email us about your knotweed today and get your treatment plan in place. Bye for now.